Hi, my name is Michelle Whitmore for the Photographer Academy, and this is my series on macro photography. Today we're going to look at the equipment that I use and why I use it. I'm going to start with the lens. I use a Canon 100mm 2.8 macro lens. It's a specific lens for macro photography. It gives you a 1-to-1 ratio, so you are seeing things as they actually are in true. There are some macro lenses out there, but they're not definite true 1-to-1 lenses. These retail at around £800–900, but if you want to just sample macro photography without spending a massive amount, there are alternatives that you can use. The first one is the Raynox DCR 250. Retails at about £50, and all it is just a small lens that fits onto the front of your existing lens. Works really well with the 24-105 or the 70-200. Use it a lot in the workshops for people that don't have macro lenses. Just to give you a quick example of how close it will get, that's a normal picture, and this has been taken with this Raynox lens. Another alternative is extension tubes and extender tubes. The difference between the two of them is that the extension tubes take the lens closer to the subject, whereas the extender tubes actually magnifies the subject. When it comes to lighting, I have two setups. The first one is the Bowen Studio system, which I use in the studio for more controlled lighting. When I'm in the garden, I use the speed light with a micro softbox on it to just give a quick flash where it's needed. Both of these are triggered with the Yungo triggers. Regardless of what system I'm using, I always use a light meter. I use the Sekonic 308, which is the basic model, so that I can get the most accurate exposure readings for the images. I use two different tripods for my photography. Each has a different head. The first one is a pistol grip ball head, which I mainly use outdoors. I use this one because it's very easy and quick to manoeuvre. Insects don't sit still for very long, so I need to be able to get that shot quickly. The second one I use, again, is another Manfrotto. It is a 3-axis head, and I use this one in the studio, and it gives me more control over the shots and the angles that I get. With this one I'm able to manoeuvre it up and down, sideways, and obviously it twists right the way around too. I also use a shutter release, particularly when I'm working in the garden. I do this to avoid any camera shake and causing blurry images. I also use it an awful lot when I'm doing my extreme macro photography, and the reason for that is because the lens is so sensitive to any form of movement that any touching of the camera will be picked up. So I always use the shutter release for that. As I've just mentioned, I also do extreme macro photography. The difference between the two is the depth of field. Macro photography is 1-to-1 and it's a close-up. Extreme macro photography takes it that step further and opens a world that many of us don't see. This obviously requires specialist equipment. For this, I use the Canon MPE 65mm lens. It has a 1:5 magnification. This lens takes one image on a single focal plane. So to create each image, they're then stacked. To ensure accuracy and even distribution of those planes, I use a sliding rail. This enables me to make even micro adjustments at each stage just by simply twisting the barrel. The final piece of kit I use for the extreme macro photography is a ring flash. The reason I use this is because the lens is so close to a subject, the studio lights and the normal speed lights the lens would cast a shadow over the subject, whereas the ring flash gives a more even distribution. Again, for those that just want to have a taster of the subject of extreme macro photography, Raynox also do a little lens. It's the MSN 202. It's a nice little lens. It does its job. It does up to ×4, unlike the MPE, which does ×5. Other pieces of equipment that I find useful are clamps. They are clamps. They're made by Wimberley, and you have a clip on one end for attaching the subjects, and then there's like a bulldog clip on the other end which can be fixed to the desk. Alternatively, it's in the garden. It can be used to move distracting background twigs out of the way. It can also be used as a third arm. It will quite happily hold a mini reflector, and it will also hold backgrounds, anything else I want to use it for. My last two pieces of equipment are various paper backgrounds, handy if the background is absolutely rubbish or if I want to create something unusual. And the last one is my vast array of props. Rocks, twigs, lichen, grasses, mosses, seed heads, you name it, it's there. So that's the basics of my kit, and now we'll do a short demonstration on a still life subject. Right, we've now set the studio up and we're going to look at the basics of macro photography using a variety of flowers. The first subject we're going to use is a single geranium because it's a single basic flower and it will give us a few different points to look at. As you can see, the camera and the lights are already set up, and the first thing I will do is meter each of the lights individually so that I can get my f-stop. So the first light I'm going to set is the speed light. I'm using the Yungo triggers on it, and one of the little tweaks on it is that you have to half press the shutter on the camera before the trigger will actually activate. That reading is f4, so I'll be looking at my lights to read f8. So I'll switch this light off and meter this one on its own. And reset the meter and use the other trigger, and that's reading f5.69. So if I just up the meter, the reading slightly and reset. Right, so those settings give me a reading of f8, which I'll now plug into the camera. I'm using an ISO of 100, which I always use in the studio, and a shutter speed of 125, and we're ready to take the shot. This particular geranium is a single flower with 5 leaves and some lovely star-shaped stamens, so that's going to be my focal point for this first image. Right, I'm quite pleased with that as a floral shot, and now I'm going to go in even closer and try and pick the stamens up on their own. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is get right in close, twist it slightly. It's worth mentioning that when working with flowers you need to work really quickly. Some of the flowers do tend to wilt and dry very, very easily. As you can see, this geranium, we've only been shooting it a few minutes and it's already started to wilt. So I've had to go into the garden and collect another one. What I'm going to do is actually bring down the light a little. It's much better. In fact, looking at it, this one is actually a nicer flower because we've got the stamens on. We haven't got the star in the centre, but we've got the stamens on it instead. I'm just going to do one more shot with this flower. I'm going to do it from a different angle this time. So the thing with flowers, although we only see them from above, they do have interesting shapes and forms at different angles. So this one, the geranium, is like a cup shape. So I'm going to move it around so that we get the bell effect underneath. So I can see two shots with this one. So first we'll do an above shot. On each occasion I'm focusing on the stems rather than the petals. As you can see, two distinct different images from the same flower. I've now twisted the flower around very, very slightly so that we can get it with one of the petals just falling off to the side so we can see both the cup and the stamens. So there I've taken two images, one that focuses on the stamen and one that focuses on the petals. Lovely. Happy with that? Right, I've now switched from the geranium to a Japanese anemone. The features of this flower that I like are the fact that there's layered petals, so we can do some abstract images with this. There's also lots and lots of stamens as well as a main centrepiece. So there's lots for the macro photographer to be looking at in this particular flower. For the first shot, I'm going to go for the centre and the stamens. And I've made that into what I would call an abstract floral image. With this image I'm going to shoot straight on, or head on, and I'm aiming for the gap in between the layers. Well, that's just a couple of examples of some of the shots that I would take. Normally I would take several more, different angles, different flower positions, and focusing on different parts of the flower itself. Occasionally I might do, say, half of the stamens and then leave 2/3 of the background just to give it some negative space. I've now moved on to an Erigeum varifolium. I love the spikes on the leaves, the contrast of the flowers, and it just adds a different depth to the images. When using plants, one of the things you have to be careful of is plants or items with short stems and getting the plants actually into focus. So it could either be photoshopping them out or just try and avoid them where possible. The next shot I'm going to focus on one of the smaller side flowers and the star spiked leaves. And the last of the flower shots for today is a blue geranium. This is a lot bigger than the flowers that we've looked at already. We've got a couple of subjects that we can do here. We've got the centre stamens and the small looking flowers in the middle. We've got the main flowers themselves, but we've also got the lines that are created to create abstracts with. So the first shot I shall look at doing is the centre of one of these flowers. Lovely. The second shot I'm going to do is going to be in between some of the petals, just to create some abstract lines. Another little tool I often keep in the studio is a paintbrush. Sometimes there's stamens, the pollen has spilt onto the leaves, so I'll just use the paintbrush to brush them out, saves doing it later in Photoshop. I'm going to go really in close on this one. Nice. So that was a basic introduction into macro photography. As you can see, I've only done a very, very short demonstration for you. So play around with the angles, change your backgrounds, change your lighting positions, and have fun with it. I've been Michelle Whitmore for Photographer Academy. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you again soon.